All right, the other big story here in Michigan today, it is day one of jury selection in the involuntary manslaughter trial of Jennifer Crumbly. She is the mother of the Oxford High School shooter. Right now, there are no cameras allowed in the courtroom as they start to go through the jury selection process. The prosecution and the defense picking the jurors. The pool is pretty big. Over 300 jurors have been called, potential jurors have been called there up in Oakland County. We're going to get to what's happening there in just a moment. But first, I'd like to back up and take a look at this historic case and what the prosecution has to prove here. When Jennifer and James Crumbly walk separately into courtrooms in Oakland County, the country will be watching. How significant is this attempted prosecution of these parents of a school shooter?
Yeah, it is historic.
The Crumblys charged each with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter after their son opened fire in Oxford High School over 2 years ago, killing 4 students. It's a first-of-its-kind prosecution. Defense attorney George Danini from Butzel walks us through what to expect. Explain for us what they're facing.
You either have murder or manslaughter. But again, typically it's about what did the person do to the victim, and here it's what did indirectly what was done, and that's what makes it harder, I think, here.
Explain criminal negligence in this case.
So is the bad event, was that foreseeable, and were there things that you could have done to prevent it?
And so foresee is really the key here.
So I think that's right, and I think you're going to see that as part of the defense. I would imagine the defense is going to say, what parent could have foreseen something like this happening by their own child?
Let's talk about evidence and what evidence is going to be very important here.
Here we have clear signs, things that they saw, things that the school pointed out that they neglected to act upon. And I think the biggest thing is they, or at least the father, purchased the gun that was used to commit this offense. They refused to remove him from the school. He remained at the school, and obviously what happened happened. And I think that's the point that the prosecution is going to make. Had they done something, they could have avoided this.
We know that a judge has thrown out that prosecution can't talk about affairs. They can't talk about the bird torture. They can't talk about how messy the house was, alcohol use, pot use. But what can be put into evidence is the money and the time that Crumbly spent on other activities like horses and their son playing violent video games.
The judge trying to do a balancing act about what should come in, what shouldn't. So yeah, something like an extramarital affair really doesn't go to this issue.
What will be admissible? Video of the shooting and testimony of 2 witnesses, a teacher and assistant principal. And remember, the Crumblys will be tried separately. They're now co-defendants, not on the same team. What would you say to people who are watching this and how they should watch it with a critical eye?
Look, emotion is very much involved in a case like this, but should somebody be held criminally responsible for somebody else's conduct? And I think that's something that we should pay attention to. Here maybe the answer is going to be yes, but some may say that's going too far with the criminal justice system.
All right, so jury selection is underway. Sean Lay is in the courthouse right now. Again, there are not cameras allowed in the courtroom for jury selection. And if you've ever been called for jury duty before, you know that this can be a long process. But Karen Drew is with me now to give us an idea of what's happening right now with jury selection. And Karen, we know that there's a big pool of jurors that have been called, 325. Describe for us who can be in the courtroom right now and actually who's in there.
Well, it's really interesting, obviously, with the jury selection. Let me first start with this. The tone of the courthouse, which is really interesting. A lot of times a case happens and, you just go into the 2nd or 3rd floor and you don't notice. Well, I've got some folks that are inside the courthouse and they said it's just been rumbling and buzzing all morning long. I mean, everyone is wondering exactly what's going to happen. And obviously jury selection is going on today, but it's intense over there right now. The judge is allowing, going bit by bit in terms of letting each section of jurors come in. There are, I believe, 8 to 10 members of the media that have been allowed in. It is an open courtroom in the sense that if you are a member of the public and there is a seat available, you can get in there. I have been told that there have been, I believe there was 3 to 4 victims that were directly related to this shooting that did want to make an appearance in that jury selection. And I know you've covered these court cases. You're right. Sometimes jury selection can be tedious, but every single decision is so important in picking out that juror. And experts say, there's no question that these jurors know what occurred in terms of what was covered, but they need to put that aside and see if they can make some fair decisions, because there has been a lot of media coverage on this, Christy.
Yeah, Karen, and I know sometimes with this is a hurry up and wait situation. Yeah. Do we know if they have actually started asking questions of the jurors yet, or is it still in process?
Last that I did check is that they were bringing them in, and then there was that outside counsel question saying, okay, now what can we do in terms of if we do want to remove a juror? How are we doing that? What are the guidelines there? And this is really no surprise. This is no delay tactics. I mean, they need to make sure that everything is done correctly, so we do this trial correctly and there are no mistakes. So it is a hurry up and wait situation. But this is an important job, a very important job. You and I have been discussing this with the newsroom. I mean, the entire country is watching exactly what's going to happen in this case in terms of, the fact that the mother is being charged in this crime, but at the same time, it's a different charge than her son is being charged. And then you take a look at the enormity of this case in the sense that if someone's found guilty in this, how is this going to apply to other cases where parents could possibly be involved? And it goes beyond shooting too.
Yeah, it does. And I think also as parents, people sit and they think, can I be held responsible criminally for something that my child does? Let me ask you this. So people say transparency. So how come, if there are going to be cameras in the court for the trial, how come there are not cameras in the court right now for jury selection? We know that's to protect the potential juries who are going to be chosen.
It really is important to protect these jurors. It is a big task to ask somebody to show up in court every single day. And no matter what, it's emotional, it's hard, it's draining. Not only the information that you're going to hear, the visuals you're going to see, and now the responsibility you are going to hold in your heart and soul forever. So all of that is enough to ask of an individual beyond saying you're going to miss work, you're going to miss your income, you're going to have to figure out your child care situation. I mean, so beyond all of that, you're dealing with this. They have a right to have that time and space, and it's what we've done many times in covering jurors, and then a lot of times when you cover obviously the trial, you face the camera towards the judge and who's speaking, and because that is where the story is and that is where the facts are. You shouldn't be judging the jury. It's hard. It really is hard on them.
Yeah, and then sometimes we do hear from the jury after a verdict, if they do want to talk, and usually that's coordinated with the judge. And again, you talk about the tough job that the jury has in taking the information that's presented to them in court, not what they've seen in the media, not what they've experienced themselves over these last 2 years is how long the Crumblys have been in jail waiting for this.
It's really interesting too, because I was talking to a few insiders and also just some quote experts on the prosecution side, because there is a lot of talk in terms of the marriage of the parents and whether there was infidelities or a whole long string of elements or issues. But what I continue to hear from the experts, we're not judging parenting. We're not judging whether or not in a sense you are a good mom or dad. We are judging your responsibility for an involuntary manslaughter charge. And in and of itself, in that charge is you knew there was a danger and you should have taken action on it. It doesn't matter if you had marital problems 5-10 years ago or there was all those, because if you put your attention on that, you're taking it away from the case, and really that's not fair, that's not legal. They really need to focus in on this involuntary manslaughter charge, which is really going to be interesting to see because there is a gray area. It's not clear.
Yeah, what the prosecution has to prove. All right, Karen, really appreciate this. We know you're going to continue to monitor this throughout the day. And as we continue our coverage here on Local 4 Plus, I'll see you in just a little bit. Okay, thanks. And of course, Sean Lay is in court right now, and he is sending updates through clickondetroit.com. So you want to stay with clickondetroit.com so you can see what he is just kind of giving us our updates every 20 minutes or so you know what's going on in court. All right, while we do have a sense of how this case is going to be shaping up, we don't have witness lists. We don't know what all of the evidence is going to be, what the prosecution plans to present. But guiding us really through how to watch all of this is a defense attorney, Lillian Diallo, who joins me now. Lillian, thanks so much for being with me. From a legal perspective and all of the defense work that you have done for decades, talk to us a little bit about the process now of picking a jury. What do the attorneys want to hear from these juries, and maybe what are some of the potential questions that we could hear coming out in court?
I got it. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Go right ahead, Lillian.
Okay. So one of the things is a fair and impartial jury. We do not want jurors that are biased on one side or the other. We don't want some that are just always against the prosecution or always for the defense. We want them to be able to separate the emotion of this case, the salaciousness of this case, from the Crumbly trial, where the mother is going first. I agree. Her prior life, where she was doing whatever, should not intersect with this trial. We are talking about elements. Can the prosecutor prove the elements beyond a reasonable doubt? And it's going to turn on gross negligence. You knew something and you failed to act.
So talk to me a little bit, Lillian, about some then of the questions that a defense attorney, the prosecution will be asking potential jurors in this case, and what are they looking for in some of those answers?
They're going to ask about media coverage, obviously. Have you been influenced by that media coverage? Have you been following the media coverage? Do you have an opinion based on what you've heard for either side? Because clearly, I am a criminal defense attorney. If I heard someone say I'm against the prosecutor 100% at the beginning of voir dire, where you get to question the jury, then I would ask to excuse them, because you want someone that's going to listen. We're not saying you're just a 100% perfect human being or a robot, but you have to listen, and listen in a way that, can the prosecutor prove the elements? And so impartiality, as much as you can get, as best as you can get.
Explain for us, Lillian, the challenges that a defense attorney or prosecution would have for a particular juror, because if the juror says, you know, I think that they did it, and the prosecution's like, okay, looks good to me. How many challenges does each side get, and how does this work?
So they may give them some extra challenges on this particular case, because I do know for capital cases, you get 12. When we say capital, that means murder, one, things of that nature. This is not a capital case. So hopefully they've agreed to give them so many more than the normal you would get for a case like this, right? I think you might get 5 for non-capital cases. And that's not going to be enough, right? And the judge is going, and the court, they're going to do a balancing act as well. They're not going to want to say, hey, I want all these biased people. They want an unbiased jury as best as they can get, so this does not come back, and it has to be retried.
We know that the jury pool is 325 people right now that have been called to Oakland County. I was just going to say, so you just made the, whoa, that's a lot. Should that be enough, or have you heard of other cases that have gone through jury pools of more than that with this kind of high-profile case?
Bashara, we went through a lot of jurors. I don't know if it was 300, but a lot of the work we did was on the front end, where we did jury questionnaires. To send out to jurors that they had to fill out before. We can eliminate maybe 20, 30 right off the bat and try to get a more fair and balanced jury pool.
So how long do you think, and just from all the experience that you've had in terms of process, would it, say, you know what, this looks like it might take a week to seat a jury?
Well, so the judge is going to control how the courtroom runs. Right. And I think ultimately, I can't put a time clock on it, because you want a fair jury to both sides. That's the only way democracy works. It may be messy, but it is a process. So I don't know. So this is a very high profile case.
Yeah, Lillian, I want to ask you one thing. Again, we don't know all of the witnesses that are going to be coming out, but I did see a report today that attorneys for the high school shooter himself do not want him to testify in his parents' trial, and he has been listed as a witness in at least one of his parents' trial. What would be the significance of him taking the stand in this case?
Emotion. There is nothing that can be garnered by having that person get up on the witness stand and say what. Now, I don't know if he's a prosecution witness or a defense witness potentially, but there is nothing, there's zero to be gained or garnered other than maybe some emotional element when you see this person. So what we're judging is, what were they doing at the time? We can kind of tell the story, or I believe the prosecution can, by all the paper that we've seen, and I haven't seen it all, but nothing more, nothing. It adds nothing, in my opinion, to this case. And if that person was my client, he would not take that witness stand. You've already given him life. What's the penalty if he doesn't get up there?
Yeah,
and he's under appeal right now. It's not right.
Exactly. And you mentioned emotion, and Karen talked about how there are several victims in the courtroom who are now starting to watch this process. To have the Oxford community going through this again, and the details, and also of the families who have lost loved ones or even were injured in this shooting. Talk to me a little bit about the impact this kind of trial has again on the victims in this case.
There will never be a right for them, right? There'll never be a new normal for them. There's nothing more they want other than to get their loved one back. It's going to tear them down because they're going to, I believe, hear and see how many different ways this particular shooting could have been avoided. Right? And their 4 loved ones and all the other ones that were traumatized and shot, this could have been avoided. It's always going to be what if, what if, what if. It's not going to be easy for them. Everybody from this area remembers where they were that day the alert started coming out, and the trauma to people in the community that really aren't as involved as the people that have bacon on that fire. I just think it's going to be hard for them. And I think we want to make it, for the prosecution and the defense, we got to be decent human beings, want to make this as easy as possible for the victims as well.
Yes, who will be reliving this all over again. Lillian Diallo, thank you so much for joining me and for your perspective on this. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you in the coming days. Of course, make sure you follow us here on Local 4 Plus. We're going to be streaming this each day live from court once a jury is seated. So make sure you just download the Local 4 Plus app on your TV, wherever you get your streaming apps. Just search Local 4 Plus and follow us when you're on the go on clickondetroit.com.